Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's time to do a monthly wrap up. We're going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of December, so let's jump in. So I started off the month with a book that I believe I was supposed to read in November for Horror in 24, but for some reason I ended up reading it in December, and that is The Woman in Black. I keep saying this, but every time I wait so long, or not even wait so long, because it is only no, it is not December. It is January 7th. So it really hasn't been that long. But since this book was one of the first books of the month, I can barely remember. I mean, I remember the gist of the story. I remember we had the live show. So I will link the live show down below and up in the cards for you guys if you want to go take a look at that video, because I do talk about it in that video. So I did read it. And I remember just feeling okay about it. I loved the atmosphere. I loved how eerie it was. This just has to do, if I can remember correctly, with this man. He gets tasked the job of going to this Gothic mansion or this house to get some things in order. The woman there has died. I forget what he does or why he's doing this, but he's just going there, and just some very creepy things and very spooky things happen to him within the home and the marsh that's around the house. Some spirits. There's a story behind the ghosts that are causing ruckus, and we find out about the story and all of that. I remember after the live show though, I initially was going to give this book 3 stars, but after the live show and after really talking about it, this always happens in live shows, and that's why I love the live shows and group books, because after you talk about it and you get other people's perspective and things start sort of clicking for you, if that makes sense. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars instead of the 3. I really loved what Amanda had to say about it. Again, I'm going to link that live show so that you can see what Crystal, me, and Amanda talk about. But it was a fun time discussing the Horror in 24 book with these ladies, if you want to go check that out. Next up, I did a whole reading vlog reading women in the horror fiction genre, specifically in the indie field. And so the book that I read, the first book that I read for that reading vlog, which I will link as well if you want to take a look at it, was Waif by Samantha Kolesnik. I feel like I just talked about this book yesterday. I loved this one so much. It's a very short novella. It's a novella, not a short novella. Novellas are short, so that was redundant. It's a novella. There are graphic scenes in here, but here we are following this woman, Angela, and she is married. She has the perfect life to the public eye, to the people not behind their walls. They have the perfect marriage. But one day she has just been beaten up by her husband and she's been crying. I don't know why I laughed there, because that was definitely not funny. I've been through that, so I know what that can be like. But she is going through the motions. She's sitting at the grocery store in this parking lot and she's just people watching, and she decides to go into the grocery store even though she's been crying and stuff. And she ends up meeting a man at that grocery store that completely changes her life. And it's a story about trying to find somewhere to belong, somewhere to call home, somewhere to feel safe. It was fantastic. Samantha, this was my first time reading a Samantha Kolesnik, and I promise you it won't be the last. I loved her writing. I loved the way the story flowed, and I just liked what she had to say in regards to those matters I just spoke on, that the book touches on. It was fantastic. If you haven't read this one, I highly recommend it. It's a quick read, and trust me, it will not disappoint. I ended up giving this one 5 stars. After that, I ended up reading White Pines, which is also in that reading vlog that I will link for the women in horror fiction. Gemma Amor is an author that I have read of before, or I have read from before, with Dear Laura. I loved that novella. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. White Pines was a little bit of a different book. First off, it's not a novella. I thought I was, but my dumb self didn't do the research before. I was just like, I want to read this one. It's one that I had on my TBR list. And so I just went ahead and did it. Well, it's 400 plus pages, so be warned. Her last story, or her last work, was a novella, the one that I read. And so I don't know why in my mind, it just didn't, I didn't research it. I thought it was a novella. It wasn't. Okay. In this novel, we are following this woman. I can't remember her name and I don't have the book. I read it in ebook form. You know that something has happened where she's standing at this place. She's looking beyond this fence, and something happened at this island where all the people went missing one night. And so the story starts off with her looking into this place, and then we move back to how we got to where we were. So we're working backwards in time. And so you learn about what happens in this island. On this island, she ends up inheriting this house from her grandmother that she hasn't seen her grandmother in years and years. She remembers being at this house when she was a wee little child. And so she's like, oh, well, she doesn't have nowhere else to go. So she treks on 18 hours. She goes to the house, and that's where the story really starts happening. There's this island across the way that she can see. And she's being drawn to the island. The people in this town are super, super weird, and they tell her, don't be fooled by this island. Don't go to this island. What happens when you tell somebody not to do something? Curiosity just takes the best of them, and she ends up going to this island and wrapping herself up in this part of town or this island. And again, all the people there go missing. So it's just trying to figure out what happened to these people and how to bring them back. It was a great novel. I liked the writing. I liked the story. It's just that the ending didn't work for me, and it got a bit confusing there for a minute. But I do love Gemma Amor's writing style and her stories. It is a very unique story. There's a backstory to there where they get to explaining to what this island was that I really did enjoy. So I ended up giving this one 3 stars because I like the overall journey and the topics and the overall like character layout and the story development. I liked all of that. It's just the ending left much to be desired for my personal taste. Now we're getting into the Merry and Bright readathon. I also have a reading vlog for that. If you haven't checked it out, I will link it up above. I loved this readathon so much. The first book that I read for the Merry and Bright was You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hoggle. I think it's Hoggle or Hogel. It was a romance novel. This was enemies to lovers in a way. It's supposed to be enemies to lover, but here we're following this couple. They are engaged. But you know that they just don't like each other. They're doing everything possible in their power to have the other one break off the engagement, which is soon coming up. She doesn't want to break the engagement because his parents are the ones that are paying for everything, and they're like, they have money, and they keep saying, oh, they'll never make it down the aisle, they'll never make it down the aisle. She wants to prove them wrong. She's like, no, I'm gonna walk down the aisle. And also, if she ends up breaking up the wedding, the mother-in-law or the future mother-in-law has already told her that she's gonna have to pay for everything that she's already paid for because she's not losing this money. And then the fiance, the boyfriend, let's say, he's just given up. There's just no chemistry there anymore. He spends most of his time just playing video games, but somewhere along the lines, something happens and they sort of meet in the middle, meet in love again. It wasn't nothing spectacular. It was entertaining. It was funny for me. It was so funny. Our main character, I can't really remember her name, but she was just so funny for me in some of the things that she would do. They have this battle going on and this banter going on to sort of have the other person break up the relationship, and the things that she comes up with and says to me were just hilarious. I've read a few reviews saying that she's such an unlikable character, and I feel like they're both very unlikable. At the beginning I couldn't stand him, and I liked her, and then somewhere along the line I didn't like her. I ended up liking it. I thought it was a fun time, and it did its job of entertaining and just giving me something to swoon about at the moment. It's not something that I'm gonna think about and say, oh my gosh, this was a masterpiece. Not at all. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. It was fun while I was reading it. I read the flat share also for the Merry and Bright readathon. This is just a book that I've had on my TBR for such a long time, and I'm so happy that I finally read it. I loved this book so much. The whole idea of having a flat share, an apartment that you share with somebody that you don't know, where you sleep in the same bed and use everything the same, and you don't know this person, just freaks me out. And I kept thinking, like, how are they doing this? But in this story, there's this guy and he works graveyard shifts at a hospital or at like this medical place. And so he decides to rent out his apartment for the other half of the time that he's not there for somebody else. And this woman ends up finding this ad. She lives with her ex-boyfriend at the time. They lived together. They were on and off, but she finds out that the ex-boyfriend is actually already dating somebody else and engaged to somebody else. So she's sort of like, you know, let me move out of here, but she can't afford anything. So she finds this ad and she ends up renting the apartment for half of the time. So when he's at the apartment, she's not there, she's working, and when she's at the apartment, he's working. So it sort of works out, but they sleep on the same bed. They they share everything. They just don't know each other. And I'm like, how can you do that? You don't know this other person's personal hygiene or anything of this person. But anyways, through notes that they leave each other, they start getting to know each other, and you know, romance ensues after that. There's also a backstory of his brother being in jail that she sort of wraps herself into this story in his life. But it was great. I loved it so much. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I finally read Where the Dead Go to Die, also for the Merry and Bright readathon. This wasn't so merry and bright, but you know, I am a horror reader, so I can't just read romance. I mean, I sprinkle them inside my reading, and being that it was the Merry and Bright, I tried to have more bright books in the mix, but I had to read a horror novel, and this one has been on my TBR forever. I've been dying to read it forever. Boy, oh boy, I loved this one. I listened to it on audio, and the audiobook was amazing. So this is something like along the lines of like zombies. We start off the book with this woman, and she is coming into this facility, and in this facility it's almost like a hospice. It's where these patients go and they try to make them as comfortable as possible in the process of them dying. So the process of them dying, they go through many different stages. Their coherence, they don't just die and become zombies. There's like this long process, and then they die, and it's when they come back. But they're not like brain dead zombies. What happens is that they crave bone marrow, and that's why they end up biting, and they end up, you know, attacking people. But she goes in there, and it's just her working in this facility and just trying to survive. And then, you know, obviously, like in all apocalyptic zombie novels and movies, shit hits the fan and stuff happens at this facility. It was great. I loved this. Is an illustrated book, and the illustrations for the biters where it was just, or the smileys, they call them smileys because of the way that their bodies deteriorate. It just really added to the story. I wish there would have been more illustrations. The writing was phenomenal. I love seeing the character growth for Emily. One thing I just did not like was the ending to this. I don't know, I just did not enjoy the ending. The ending sort of fell flat for me, but I am an unpopular opinion on that. My friend Tali read this and she loved the ending. It was like, it really hit her, and it is a very hitting ending, but for me, I just wanted a little bit more because this novel was so fantastic for me that I felt like the ending was a little bit rushed. I ended up giving this one 4 stars, but it was fantastic. If you have not read this, this is a great winter zombie read that I just highly recommend. Then I ended up reading Dying for Christmas, which was the Sleep When I'm Dead book club pick for December, and it is hosted by Jess, and the co-host for the month was Gwen. I love them both. FYI, I am co-hosting January with Jess, and we're reading The Glass Forest. I didn't do a TBR video this month, so I'm letting you know now that this is the January pick for Sleep When I'm Dead book club. I will leave Jess's video linked down below, and I believe the live show is going to be January 20th, but check the description box because if I'm wrong, I will rectify the date here or I'll put it here, but I believe it's January 20th, and I'm so excited to read this book. But back to Dying for Christmas by Tammy Cohen. This is a thriller novel that's pretty dark, but if I'm completely honest with you, I don't remember a lot about it now. So I guess it was pretty forgettable. It is very twisted. I just read the synopsis to sort of like refresh my memory, and yes, I remember. This takes place on Christmas Eve, or actually not really. It takes place in December. This woman is shopping for Christmas gifts, and she's approached by this man, and somehow she just ends up going to this stranger's apartment. She is engaged to somebody else, and you see that she keeps thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I going to this man's apartment? This is crazy. But she ends up going to this man's apartment, and he ends up kidnapping her in there, and the story develops from there. It was a great story all up to about the halfway mark. Just something, it just drops the ball somehow. The intensity and the darkness that you get from the first half of the book somehow just falls off. that was the major consensus from the live show that they talked about this book. I hadn't read the book yet when the live show came on, so I just watched it for a little bit before they got into spoilers. But that's one thing that I kept hearing people say, was that after the halfway mark, it sort of just drops the ball a little bit, and I agree with that. The whole twist to it was kind of like lackluster for me, and it didn't add to the story. It actually took away from the story. But either way, I ended up giving this one 3 stars. It was an okay time. It was entertaining for the most part. I just wish it would have kept going with that intensity that it had from the beginning. These R.L. Stine's books are just my life. First off, I cringe when I edit my videos and I have to say R.L. Stine's name, because it sounds like I'm saying Arl. No, it's not Arl, because I say it so fast. It's R.L. Stine. So now I'm going to start enunciating it like that. R.L. Stine. Because I just cringe. I don't like the way I say it. But here we are. I ended up reading Silent Night, which is a super chiller by R.L. Stine. And I loved this. Every time I read one of these little books, I get what the hype is about. I get it. I wish I would have read these as a kid. I think I would have been more obsessed with it than I am now. They're just fantastic. They're cheesy, but they're great. They're thrillery, and I just love them. I've said this a million times. Halloween Night was one of my favorites. Now Silent Night is another one of my favorites. This is a trilogy, and I do have book 2. I haven't read it yet. But here we follow teens and revenge and killing and, the famous in the dark mall scenes, which was the thing back in the 80s and 90s, the dark, empty mall scene in the middle of the night. Oh my gosh, those are the best in my opinion. You have one of those scenes in here that just absolutely thrilled me. But this was fantastic. Is it cheesy? Yes, it is super cheesy. I don't think that everybody will like this, especially as an adult, but it did it for me. Here we are following Reva, and Reva is a bitch. I mean, she is your high school typical bitch. She has money. Her dad owns this department store. That her mom has passed away, and she's just nasty. She ends up breaking up with her boyfriend in a very mocking kind of way. But the holidays are here, and the dad tells her, hey, look, if any of your friends want to pick up shifts or want a holiday kind of a job, please tell them to come. And half of the people that she tells to come to work there, she's doing it to make fun of them, or she's just mean. And so somebody is trying to get to her. Somebody is trying to hurt her, and she sees people following her. There's this lipstick scene that has a needle in it, and she's all freaked out, and she thinks it's her ex-boyfriend. But being that she's so mean, she doesn't know really who it is, because it could be anybody that she's made fun of or hurt in the past week or month or whatever. And so that's what the story is about. Again, it was just a fun time. I ended up giving this one 4 stars.
I don't know about making sense in any of these. I don't know what I just said there.
This next book has become a favorite of mine, and the way I came about the book and the way I came upon reading it was all very impromptu, because it was a book of the month pick that it wasn't on my radar. I didn't even know it was going to be a thing, but I ended up buying it off of Book of the Month because of the cover, and because after I read the synopsis, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to read this. But our Book of the Month books, they just sit there, at least mine. Those are all my Book of the Months over there. I just put them there and I don't read them. But I needed to read a debut novel to sort of close out the challenge for Book of the Month. This was a debut novel, and I actually found the audiobook. So I was like, score. So it was an impromptu read, and it is a favorite. So I'm going to start rambling on. The book is The Keeper of Night by Kylie Lee Baker. Wow, was this a surprise. This grabbed me and shook me and just threw me, and I loved it. Loved it. I never thought I would love this book so much, and I'm so glad that it was such a surprise, because it's just books like these that it's why I read. It's surprises, because again, this wasn't on my radar. But when I read that this had to do with a goddess of death and the Shinigami and Japanese mythology of the underworld, I was sold. Here we are following Ren, and she is a a reaper of souls. She goes and she's basically death, the Grim Reaper, but there's like a bunch of them, and they have like this clock or this watch that they manipulate time with to do what they have to do. But she ends up escaping the British death guard. That's not what they're called, but she ends up fleeing, like she ends up running away, and she wants to go to Japan because her mom was Japanese. She has this power that she's a Shinigami, and so she has like this power with light and stuff, and that is like a big no-no where she's at, and they find her out, so she has to escape. So she goes to Japan. Her little brother goes with her, and which he's not supposed to, her half-brother, but her half-brother loves her so much and she loves him, so he ends up fleeing with her, and they make it to Japan, and they make it to the underworld, to the goddess of death, and she has to prove herself to because she wants to find her mom, and the goddess tells her, if you do this for me, I will tell you where your mom is. It was fantastic. That was just the tip of the surface. I just skimmed the surface for you because this was so great. The story development, this is a debut novel. Hello, this is a debut novel, and I felt like I was reading a book from somebody that has been writing forever. Just the character development, the world building, the whole setting and atmosphere was just on point. When she describes Ren going into the realm where the goddess of death is, like the oppression that you feel, and like the heaviness and how it smells. I mean, it was fantastic. I loved it. I cried at the end, and I need book 2 like right now, because that ending left me like, what the hell? Spoiler, you guys will see this in my favorites of 2021. I was blown away by this. Will everybody like it just because I'm here raving about it? No. So please, like, I can't stand like raving about a book and then like if somebody reads it, oh, but it wasn't that great. Everybody likes different things. This just really did it for me. It grabbed me and shook me, like I said from the beginning, and it just threw me and left me there crying because it was just fantastic. Fantastic. 5 stars. Again, 5 stars. 5 freaking stars. I loved it. 5 freaking stars. Oh, I'm so stupid. 2021 was a year where I realized a lot of things in my reading life. A lot of things. At my age, that is very exciting. But I read The Loss Apothecary, and I loved this so much. I loved this so much. I went into it a little bit guarded because I heard a lot of my friends were disappointed by this. They were expecting one thing and got something else. I think my friend Amy had said that she went in here thinking that she was going to read about magic spells and things like that, and that is not what she got, and I can see that. I can see that. So I went in kind of like a little guarded, and I guess with like different expectations than what other people went into it with, and maybe that's why I loved it so much. I don't know, but this was another one. It was just a story that you follow along, and you just follow along this story. I don't know how else to say it. But this follows 2 timelines. You are following it back in, let me see because I can't remember the timeline. Back in the 1700s and then present day. There's this apothecary that was basically just given to her, or what is that called? I can't even think of the word. Basically, she inherited this apothecary that her mother had. Her mother fell ill and died, and she has been working with her mom at this apothecary for years, so she knew everything that needed to be done, and all the not spells necessarily, but all the tinctures and all like the things, right? And so somewhere along the lines, she gets hurt in love, and she just turns into this other person. Not this mean person or anything, but basically she helps women revenge people who have hurt them. Like if the husband has a mistress, they'll come to her and she does things, but she never hurts another woman. Her whole thing is revenge against men. And so obviously she's hiding, or her apothecary is hidden somewhere because she's doing illegal things. But nobody ever knows that she's doing these things until this one time. She has a bad feeling about this customer that she gets, but either way, she just goes along with it and shit hits the fan. And then we're following present day to this woman. She is on vacation, but she's on vacation by herself, and this is supposed to be an anniversary vacation. Come to find out, right before their trip, she's like in love with her husband, and right before this trip, she finds out that her husband is cheating on her. So she's like, listen, I need time by myself, and she ends up taking this trip again by herself, just to sort of clear her mind and get away from the heartbreak. Not get away from the heartbreak, but just to have some room to breathe without her husband. And she's on this tour one day and ends up finding a little bottle that takes her back to the history of this apothecary, because this little bottle is from this apothecary. So it's this whole thing of back and forth. We're following the storyline from the apothecary and what happens, and to this lady and to her apprentice eventually, and what happens to this lady in the present time and how it ties everything together. I just loved it. I have found out in 2021 that I just love witchy historical fiction. I'm gonna say that. You will hear me say that again in my upcoming videos, because it was just such a huge surprise with some of the books that I fell in love with in 2021. And we'll talk about it in my favorites of 2021 video, but I ended up giving this one 4 stars, and just, I really, really enjoyed it. It's not gonna be for everybody though. It really isn't, because that's more of a slow burn story. It's almost like just a story that you're following about women and things that happen. They're not super exciting, but to me, they're just entertaining, and they just grabbed me and just really just grabbed my heart, honestly. Guys, I read A Christmas Carol for the first time ever. First off, in my book haul, my last book haul where I show these editions, I forget to show this one because I was currently reading this one when I filmed that video, and I totally forgot that I got this book in this edition as well. So look at that, how beautiful this book. This is the 5th one. I thought I bought 4 of them, but I bought 5 of the 12 that are in these editions. These are the Wordsworth edition. I linked them in the book haul video in my description box. I will link this one down there as well. All the books that I talk about in these videos will always be linked in the description box. But it was my first time reading A Christmas Carol, and I don't even know why I did it. I guess because it was Christmas and whatever. I listened to it as an audiobook from Audible, but this was written like when? Woof, like eons and eons and eons ago. And I've said this before, I don't bode well with stories that are written in like long time ago, like long time ago. I mean, this book was published in 1843, for crying out loud. I mean, not this edition, but this story was published in 1843, for crying out loud. Like half of the time I was like, wait, what? And I only was able to follow the story, and I say follow very loosely, because I know what this story is about. I mean, who doesn't know what the story? I've seen cartoon renditions of it. I've read other stories of it. You know, there's a million retellings of this story. So that was the only way that I was able to follow what was happening in this book, because there was a lot of verbiage that I just did not understand. So I gave this one 3 stars because I feel like I had to give it 3 stars, but it wasn't my favorite. I much rather read or watch, better yet, the many retellings that have been made from this. I'm glad it was short as well, I will say that. All right, the next book that I read, I actually read it because, I mean, first off, it's a part of a 12-book series. Why am I doing this? It's a YA series, so it's not that serious. And it's actually 8 books, but there are 3 companions or 0.5s of the story altogether. And from what I hear from my friend Joyce, it is from the point of view of the male side of the story. I have read Zodiac Academy, The Awakening, which is book 1 of the series, and I like YA fantasy. It's been a while since I've read a YA fantasy. Well, before this, I mean, all of this here, mostly 80% of what's back here is YA fantasy. Middle grade down here. I love a good young fantasy story. But I think that, I don't know if it's my age, I think I'm growing out of it because I've been reading less and less and less of it. And it's not because I've been disappointed by any of them, because I haven't, but I just don't reach for them. But the covers and just the stories themselves keep me buying YA fantasy. I mean, I haven't bought a YA fantasy in a while. I mean, I have, but not as much as I used to before. But anyways, Zodiac Academy. Okay, this is, it reads super, super young. It's not a great story. I started this book back in November. My friend Joyce was like, hey, why don't you guys read? I'm about to start Zodiac Academy. She was in a reading slump, and I'm like, you know what? Let's get you out of this reading slump. I'll buddy read it with you. Well, she's already by book 4, and I'm just finishing book 1. I put it down, and it wasn't until I got my Kindle Paperwhite that I started reading it again. It was actually the first book. I'm like, you know what? I got to finish this, because she kept telling me it gets so much better. Book 3 is where it's at. So I just finished it, and I enjoyed it for the most part. I really enjoyed the ending, but getting to the part where I enjoyed it was a trek. This all has to do with this. It's almost like a Harry Potter-esque type of thing. Magic, a school, these twins, they're chosen. They've been living in the human world this whole time, but they're struggling. They were orphans. They were in foster parents, the whole 9 yards. And one day this man comes and is like, hey, look, you actually are fae, and I want to take you to this world. And this whole entire world is based on elements and the zodiac. So they have this tablet that tells them their zodiac and what's going to happen that day based on that. It's super cheesy. Like, they have Facebook as Facebook, their social media, and like the hashtags are super corny. And like I said, the first half of the book was a trek to get through, but I really liked the ending. I enjoyed the characters. There are the heirs, which basically are the people that are on the throne, or the family that's on the throne. It's like these 5 guys. I think it's 5 or 4, 5 guys, whatever. It's a grand old time. It's just these 2 girls finding their place at this academy, at the Zodiac Academy, and they have to go through this big test, or this big, be a reckoning or something like that. Like, they're moving forward, and if they don't make it past this point, then they get kicked out of the school. But there is a whole secret behind, or a whole plot point behind, who these 2 girls are and why the actual heirs don't want them there. I don't know if it's a spoiler. I don't know if it's in the synopsis, and I don't own the book. I read this on Kindle Unlimited, so I don't want to say too much and spoil something for somebody. But again, it's cheesy, and it was hard to get through the first half, but it was enjoyable. I'm excited to get to book 2. I am going to continue on with the series, especially because Joyce keeps telling me how good it gets. But these characters, they're fae, and you know, fae can be mean sometimes. So I enjoyed like that aspect of it, and like the banter. There's some banter that goes on in here, and I'm loving the elements, and the whole setting of the school is great as well. And the whole, like, back there's vampires, and there's shapeshifters, and there's like just a whole bunch of mythical creatures. I ended up giving this one 3 stars, and like I said, I am planning on reading the rest of the series, hopefully. And then the last and final book that I read for the month was also an impromptu kind of book. I found the audiobook. I had the book sitting on my shelf, so I went ahead and I picked it up, and that is My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. This was a book that really wasn't on my radar, just because the past 2 books that I have read from Stephen Graham Jones weren't my favorite. This was in a Nightworms box, and like I said, I saw the audiobook and I just went ahead and picked it up. I have come to realize that I don't like his books, and it's nothing personal. Sometimes it's really hard for me to come on here and say, I didn't like this book, I didn't like this book. Or it's really hard for me to say as well, I don't plan on reading any more of this author's books. It's nothing personal. I've only seen him do 1 reading on the Nightworms YouTube channel. He has a reading on there. He seems like such a nice person, such a humble person. So it's nothing personal. It's just that I don't get along with his writing style. Now, don't get me wrong, he knows how to write. He's a great writer, but there's just something of a disconnect between me and his stories. I've found this throughout all the books that I have read of his, and I think my favorite one out of all of them has been Night of the Mannequin, and even that one I think I gave 3 stars. It wasn't my favorite, but it's my favorite of his at the moment, and I think it was just because it was such a short book and I felt like the message came across nice and clear. I feel like this could have been a novella, and I could have gotten the same message that I got at the end without having to read 300 pages that I found, or 400 pages I think, that I found pointless. I never make a connection with his characters. I never make a connection with the story. And for me, I need to have some kind of connection between either of those two, between either the characters or the plot. I need to feel something. And all I feel when I read his books, honestly, is just confusion. I don't stay confused long. Like, for example, with this one, there was a lot of bursts of confusion, although those confusions end up resolving themselves in my mind. Like, I end up understanding at some point. All of those confusions just leave me not caring for the story. I was planning on DNFing this book, but I never did because, again, it was an audiobook and I just kept listening to it while I was doing whatever I was doing. And I really wanted to see what conclusion it was going to have. Now, I will say I did like the ending. I did like the resolution to the story. I liked the message at the end of the story, but the journey there was not my favorite. I found our main character, Jade, to be pretty obnoxious. Now, I think that's the whole point of it. I think she's supposed to be obnoxious, but since I did listen to this on audio, in audiobook form, I feel like the narrator was just a little too obnoxious for me. Here we're following Jade. She is our main character and she is obsessed with slasher movies. Like, obsessed. Like, everything to her is a conversation about slashers. She turns everything into a slasher. But one day something happens where she's like, oh my gosh, this is the start of a slasher. Like, something's about to happen. She feels that something's about to happen. There's about to be murders. There's about to, something's on the verge of happening. She could just feel it. And she's on the hunt to, number one, she thinks she has found her final girl. So she is on a mission to make this girl understand that she's a final girl. And she is on a mission to find out who this killer is. Stephen Graham Jones always has a message at the end of his books. And I think that's the part that I love the most. But again, the journey that I have to take, I usually do not enjoy. I did not rate this because, again, I was gonna DNF it. I just decided that I wanted to push through because I wanted to see what the ending was, because I wanted to see if this girl Jade was just crazy or if there really was gonna be a killing spree at this town. I don't think I'm gonna be picking up any more of his books. I really wanted to like this. I've wanted to like all of the books that I've picked up of his, but they just do not work for me, and that's okay. I feel bad, but at the end of the day, it's okay. It's not a big deal. There are many other people that love his work. He's an auto-buy author for many of my friends, and they worship his work, and I am so happy that they like it. But it just does not work for me, and it makes me really sad because, like I said, the messages in his books are so good, but just the journey to get there I do not enjoy. So that's it, you guys. Those are all the books that I read for the month of December. If I had to pick a favorite, it would probably be The Keeper of Night. That book just swoons me to the moon and back. I loved it so much, and it was such a surprise, and I think that's what made me love it even more, was the surprise factor in it. Let me know what you read in the month of December and what was your favorite read. Let's chat books in the comment section down below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys in my next one. Bye.